everyone. How you guys doing? So I'll try to do this within 15 minutes, hopefully. So I'll just get started. So I want to ask everyone a question before I begin. Raise your hand if you've ever used a cryptocurrency exchange before. So who's used Coinbase, Bitstamp? There we go, some DJs down in the back there, that's great. Who has Doc with Hat, for example. Okay, so the reason why I bring this up is the problem with cryptocurrency exchanges is that they're custodial and they're not auditable. I have to take my funds, give it to the exchange, and I have to blindly trust the exchange to protect my funds. And I can't audit that they're doing the right thing. And that sucks. So when we think about, services like Coinbase and Bitstamp and exchanges, from a system perspective, what's at the heart of this type of interaction between the user and Coinbase? And at the heart of this interaction is bridge engineering. All we've been trying to build for the past 10, 14 years are bridges where a user can take their funds, bridge it to another system, transact here, and then hopefully they'll bring their funds back, back to Ethereum or the cryptocurrency itself. And this is what it looks like as a grid, and I'm sure some people remember FTX, great example for this presentation. But basically, we have Ethereum, the bridge contract, and then a single authority that controls the bridge. And this bridge is a smart contract. It may have a deposit function, a withdrawal function. And let's say Alice comes along, and Alice is a whale, and Alice wants to withdraw her 1,000 ETH from FTX. Good luck with that, but in this example, it's going to work. So FTX will send a message, give it to the bridge, and say, bridge, allow Alice to withdraw her 1,000 ETH. The bridge will say, well, FTX told me I could send Alice 1,000 ETH, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Then Alice gets her 1,000 ETH. She's happy. Maybe she goes buy some nice, biscuits or whatever. But generically, what's happening here? What's happening in this scenario? Generically speaking, you have a bridge smart contract that holds all of the assets. You can imagine a smart contract holding billions and billions of dollars. On the other side of it is this off-chain database. And the off-chain database really records the liabilities, the account balances, program state, everything else. And the trust assumption is really, how is the bridge convinced that all the liabilities are accurately recorded in this database before it allows funds to be sent onwards, for example, the Alice. And this trust assumption, how the bridge is convinced about the off-chain database, has evolved over time. So for most systems today, they've all been built using a single authority, typical Web 2 technology. The next evolution of that, you could say, well, let's build a system where we trust multiple authorities, K out of N. And as long as, 2 out of 3 authorities say this is okay, then the funds can be sent. And another approach was these crypto-economic bridges, like, Polygon proof of stake. But when you look at the crypto-economic bridges, they're basically just multi-sigs under the hood. For example, in 2021, oh, look at my slide. That's a great rendering, isn't it? Clearly isn't supposed to be that way. But, so in this example, in Polygon, in 2021, around 6 authorities controlled 85% of the stake, and you're really trusting 6 entities to protect billions of dollars. And that sucks. In all of these examples, it sucks because we're trusting less than 10 parties to protect billions of dollars. And it doesn't suck from an ideological perspective. It just sucks practically. Because over the years, exchanges keep getting hacked. Maybe as a great example, raise your hand if you've lost money because of an exchange. Look at that. Look, there's the true DJs over here. Exactly, it's really frustrating. But it's not frustrating because these companies are malicious. It's frustrating because it's very difficult for humans to protect a single private key with access to billions of dollars. It is a very difficult problem. You're trusting humans to protect billions of dollars in a private key. And because of that, they keep making mistakes and they keep losing money. Now, another issue is that, as I mentioned, you can't audit these systems. So sometimes a system will say, oh, we're a multi-sig. But you can't actually verify whether they are a multi-sig or not. So one example was the Ronan Bridge. They lost $600 million. 5 out of 9 validators got compromised. 4 of the validators were just one company. So even if you have a multi-authority bridge, it could just really be one authority under the hood. Or they could be just outright malicious, these companies as well. They could do embezzlement, fraud. It could be like FTX, where they take your deposit and they immediately spend it. You have no way to verify they're doing the right thing. So this brings up the question, can we transact on an off-chain system while allowing users to maintain self-custody of their funds? So could I take my funds, lock it into a system, transact here, bring my funds back, but I never have to trust the operator with my funds, but I get exactly the same service? And that was the goal of the original sidechain paper in 2014. They tried to build a system where I could take my Bitcoin, lock my Bitcoin up, it gets unlocked on a sidechain, I transact here as much as I want, and then I bring my Bitcoin back to the Bitcoin network. Unfortunately, in 2014, the issue was that if the sidechain went offline for whatever reason, your funds would get stuck. So the idea is that they couldn't steal your funds, but it could get stuck if it goes offline. So the real question is, can we build a bridge that will protect us from an all-powerful authority? Even if the entire system goes offline, I can still safely get my funds back out. So I really don't have to trust the operator of that system. And this all began with Plasma back in 2017. Unfortunately, Vitalik's not here anymore to hear my joke. But I don't know if anyone tried to read this paper. It's awful. I asked Joseph Poon about it, and Joseph told me, the way this paper was written was aspirational. It's a very fun paper to read, let's put it that way. But over the years, from 2017 to 2019, there was an explosion of different plasmas. There's Plasma Li, Plasma EVM, Plasma, got the screen here, Plasma Prime. But the problem around this stage, around Plasma, is that none of these systems really worked. They sort of worked, but they were all really awful. And that's because as a community, we didn't understand the design space. We didn't understand how to design a good system that solves this problem. But thankfully, there's a guy called Barry Whitehat. He released a repo in 2019 called The Rollup, and that has led to the explosion of rollups as we know it today. And in this repo, he basically solved a really easy problem. He said, guys, stop caring about the data problem, post everything to Ethereum, and then just work on integrity, as we're going to see now. So he simplified the design space. And this eventually led to the validating bridge, where you still have a bridge, you still have this off-chain database, but now the goal is you have this special executor who comes along, he wants to update the database, and it's the executor's job to, one, propose an update to the bridge, but now the bridge will not blindly trust the executor. The executor also must provide convincing evidence that beyond all doubt that this update to the database is valid and correct. And if the executor can convince a smart contract holding billions of dollars that this update to the database is valid, it will be accepted. And that's what all the rollups are trying to build today. So ultimately, if this works, we can sort of, Ethereum can beat the adversary, it can prevent censorship, it can prevent invalid transactions, I can ultimately protect the user from the operator. So this sounds cool, how does it work? So we're going to hopefully skim over this, I've only got a few minutes left, so let's see how far I get through. So we're going to talk about the agents, here are the players. At a high level, how does this work? And maybe a little bit about the threat model and the security properties that we care about. So there's three users. There's Alice, there's low users, he likes mooncats. She wants to buy, maybe buy a mooncat on the roll-up. We have a sequencer. The sequencer's job is to take users' transactions and order them for execution. Then you have the executor, he'll take the ordered transactions, execute them, and then convince the bridge. So let's see how this works at a high level. So Alice comes along, and she'll deposit one coin into the system. She deposits one coin into the smart contract, then her balance pops up on the roll-up. And then Bob comes along. Hi, Bob. And Alice wants to send one coin to Bob. So Alice will sign a transaction and give it to the sequencer. Now, the sequencer can notify Bob to say, Bob, you're going to receive one coin. But Bob has not yet received this coin. The sequencer's job is to wait around and collect as many user transactions as possible. Eventually, the sequencer will create a list of transactions, decide the ordering of those transactions, and pass it somewhere else. So the sequencer can post this onto Ethereum, like in my example here, or pass it directly to the executors. But now the transactions are ordered, but they're not yet executed. That's where the executor comes in. He'll pick up the transactions, execute the transactions, and then hopefully post a little checkpoint to the bridge that say, bridge, if you were to execute these transactions, this is what the database will now look like, alongside convincing evidence for why this is correct. And that's just how rollups work. It's a continuous process of collect user transactions, execute transactions, and convince the bridge why the database now looks like this after executing those transactions. And of course, anyone here can pick up the transaction history and you can compute a copy of the database yourself. So you can verify that everything's correct and you really don't have to trust the operators of the system. So what's the threat model? The threat model is the following. We assume that the adversary can basically control the message flow. They can control the message flow. So the adversary can view, reorder, and drop all messages on the system. We only assume that Alice can send a transaction to Ethereum or to the blockchain. We also assume the adversary can corrupt nearly every single party in the system. So the entire off-chain system can be corrupted, and we assume there's one honest party, that could be Alice, and the blockchain itself. And this is the most powerful adversary that you can describe, and most rollups today still cannot constrain this adversary. It's a very difficult problem to solve. So what's the high-level goal here of what it means for a rollup to be secure or what a validating bridge is really trying to achieve? So the goal is that the bridge wants to protect the safety and liveness of this off-chain database. And there's three ways it will solve this problem. So first is data availability. How is the bridge convinced that every update for the off-chain system is publicly available? State transition integrity. How is the bridge convinced that every update for this database is valid and correct? And finally, censorship resistance. So even if the entire system goes offline, can the bridge support the user to execute transactions without support of the operators? So the data availability problem. Why does the data need to be publicly available? What data needs to be publicly available? And how do we guarantee it is publicly available? So this is probably the main slide I want to get across. All these systems assume that there's a one honest party that could be anyone in this room who can protect the system itself. Imagine that anyone in this room could protect the integrity of a big bank like HSBC. That would be cool, really, really cool. But the only way this works is if, as a user, as the honest party, you have access to the actual database itself. You must have access to every single update to this database. If the adversary can withhold just one database update, so you cannot compute a fresh copy of the database, then there's no way you can check that the next update is valid. So the goal for the adversary is, can I withhold one update and get away with it? What data needs to be publicly available? It could be a list of transactions, or it could be a state diff. How do we guarantee this data is publicly available? Plasma was an on-chain challenge process. It was very awkward. You can have this data availability committee, that's like the Vladiums or Arbitrum's Antitrust. Or you could have a roll-up where you take the data and then you post it to the blockchain itself. And most people do this today because it's the simplest solution and the most secure. What about state transition integrity? This is fairly straightforward. If the adversary can process one invalid transaction, then the adversary can steal all the coins in the system. And clearly no one wants that to happen. So most people normally talk about this problem, so I normally skip over it. This is, bingo, optimistic versus EK, fraud proofs versus validity proofs. That's what everyone talks about, is to solve this one single problem. And finally, censorship resistance. What if Alice wants to withdraw her coins, and the operator says, no, I will not allow you to withdraw your coins from the rollup. How dare you? In this, the solution to this is called forced inclusion, where the user can send their transaction to Ethereum, to the bridge will order this for execution and guarantee that it will eventually be executed. So what's nice here is that out of these two actors, you can ignore the sequencer altogether. The sequencer has nothing to do with censorship resistance in the worst case. It's just up to the executors who execute the transactions. And we assume there's one honest party there. So that's great. If you can solve all three security problems, maybe we can deploy a secure rollup, protect users, and protect the operator as well. Other interesting problems emerge. So I sort of put this slide together last year of different research problems that are interesting for rollups. And I think I'm just going to leave it here as my final slide, but it's sort of just to highlight one or two problems. What we're going to see is a world of rollups. Today, I think there's at least 20 different rollups that exist, and we're probably going to have 100 rollups by the end of the year, and maybe thousands in the future. So one question is about my coins in Arbitrum, how easy is it for me to get my coins the optimism? How do we solve the interruptibility problem there? Another one is experimental virtual machines. Most rollups today try to look and feel like Ethereum, including the EVM, Solidity smart contracts, and all the nice tooling can work by default. Can we go beyond the EVM, maybe support WASM or Rust, or can we have virtual machines that make it much easier to produce zero-knowledge proofs? And maybe the last one is for people who like formal models. There's still no formal model for why any of this is actually secure, which is remarkable because normally formal model people see a problem and they jump right on it. So if you like formal modeling, I would just start with a bridge and tell people, provide a model for why this is actually a secure solution. So thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed the talk.